Anyways, this one verse, really quick, I wanted to give a thank you to Nicole, who picked this book, Martha of Marta Reads, Amber of Amber Dior, Regina Renee, Adrian, Britt of Britt Writerly, Brie of the Lockbooktician, Angela Belitra Science Alliance, Eric of the Broken Spine, and I'm sure there's other people I'm missing, but basically towards the end of last year, Nicole noticed that I was near 1,000 subscribers, and so she kind of started like a social media, like, oh, can people subscribe to Chloe's channel and like watch their stuff? Like, she's really good. I really recommend her. And like a lot of other people boosted that, and I am now over 1,000 subscribers. I think I'm at like 1,020 at the time that I'm filming. So thank you to everyone who boosted and like spoke kindly of me and my videos. It meant a lot. So today I'm doing the New Year's book tag, which is a booktube staple. It's created by Bookables, and I pretty much do like the standard tag stuff, but I also like to use it as an opportunity to talk about like the results of what I said from last year and how that stuff is going. So, first question, how many books are you planning to read? So last year I did 24 new and 5 rereads, and I think I'm just going to stick to that. This isn't a goal that I put a lot of like energy towards. Like for me, if I read a book a month, like that's pretty good shape. Like I'm not really someone who wants to read like a lot of pages or just like a large volume of books in general. I'm kind of in a spot where I'm more like reading for projects or like targeted reading. So I usually set this goal pretty low. Next question is, name 5 books that you didn't get to this year but want to make a priority. So last year I did pretty good. I was 4 out of 5. I finished White is for Witching in like the last month of 2021, but I still have not finished Shinto by Jennifer Nansabuga Makumbi. I'm still working on it. Hopefully I'll finish it this year. But yeah, it's kind of been a trend that I only get to 4 of the 5 books, so I'm not really holding myself to this too much. So, one book I want to get to this year is Of One Blood by Pauline Hopkins. This is like an older, like, sci-fi fantasy book. It's about this like mixed black med student who goes on this anthropological trip to loot this Ethiopian ruins, and he finds out that they're not really ruins, like there are people still living there. I haven't really read much from like this era, especially stuff that like predates genre labels, and I want to do a better job of reading more of that. I think this is going to be more of a research read. From what I've seen in reviews, I think it's going to be sort of about this like journey of this mixed black character realizing the importance of racial consciousness and being pro-black. And I guess I'm like wary that it's going to be like very like didactic, like very like on the nose. And like also like it was written in the early 1900s, so I think there are going to be some points that are going to be made in this book that like would have been like a big deal at the time and that now have kind of been like done so much in like media that like it's not going to be as impactful of a read. That is my worry, but it is still something I want to like read and see for myself. Like Pauline Hopkins has written a lot of like essays and she was like a very influential editor, so she's still a literary figure whose work I want to read. Next book is The Brothers Jetstream Leviathan by Zigzag Claiborne. I got this in a Humble bundle and it's an ebook. And those have a tendency to kind of like slip through my fingers when I'm like trying to figure out what do I own and what do I want to read and get through. So I want to prioritize this one. This book doesn't really have a synopsis. Basically, it's just supposed to be trippy and funny, and so I'm interested to give it a read. And I kind of have a funny story about this one. The author's in a Facebook group that I'm in, and he doesn't use like his pen name on his Facebook. So I didn't recognize him from his picture. And he posted something about the sequel to this book, and I was like, oh, if you're interested in that, have you like read the first one? Next up is Forest of a Thousand Demons by Dio Fagunwa. This one I've had for a little bit. This is another more like classic work of fantasy from Nigeria. It's not quite as old as Of One Blood. This is about a hunter. I think he's like a famous warrior, and he goes into the bush, which like you're not supposed to do. There's supposed to be like ghosts and spirits there. It's not supposed to be safe for humans, but he does it anyway, and he finds like a lot of monsters there, and I think it's going to be about like his travels through the bush. Next book is The Things That Fly in the Night, Female Vampires in Literature of the Circum-Caribbean and African Diaspora by Giselle Liza Anatol. So I did a thread on Twitter last year of just like books I found that I had read that had black vampires as protagonists or like pretty like major antagonists. Like the idea was just black vampires who got like a lot of time on the page. And like it went viral for me for reasons I don't quite understand. And so people started like adding stuff to the list. And one of the books that someone mentioned was this one, which doesn't really fit 'cause it's nonfiction, but it still looked interesting. It was recommended to me by whoever runs the Twitter account for the Journal of Vampire Studies. And it looks cool. I saw the author on a panel about vampires at FIACon, and she seems interesting, and so I'm excited to read this and learn more about this topic because I don't really read much Caribbean fiction, truthfully, so it's an area where I can learn a lot more. And last up is A History of Nigeria by Toyin Falola. I haven't mentioned it yet, but I read like middle grade nonfiction African icons about like assorted historical figures from African history. And I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, this is a lot of stuff I never learned in school. This is really interesting. But I want something like for like adults now and like that goes more in depth. So I was kind of looking for like general encyclopedias, also realizing that like in terms of like stuff set outside the US or with influences outside of the US, a lot of what I'm reading is Nigerian or has Nigerian influences. And I don't really know much about Nigerian history or Nigerian culture. And so I think that like reading just like a general encyclopedia type book, so I just like even can ask like better questions as I'm reading, like do like better like targeted searches on Google to like better understand like just like background stuff and like better talk about what's going on, I think would be helpful. And I just had like a really big like, oh wow, I messed up moment this year where I had read Daughters of Henri last year, and I just thought it was like a secondary world fantasy, like inspired by type fantasy. So I hadn't really read a lot of reviews. And then I like read like an author interview where she said that like Henri is like a real place, like it was a actual empire that existed in like a certain time. And so Daughters of Henri wasn't a secondary world fantasy, it was more of a historical fantasy, which was something I completely missed when I did a quick review of it. And so I probably like misread and miscategorized a lot of things. And so I think that was just like a wake-up call that I need to do better at reading like nonfiction about places that I'm reading about where I don't really know much of anything. Next question is, what genre do you want to read more of? Last year I wanted to read 4 nonfiction books and 4 horror books, and I accomplished that. I think that was like a good goal to set. I'm gonna change it up though this year. I want to read more magazines. In general, I tend to read a lot from Anathema, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, and Uncanny and Strange Horizons. Like those are kind of, when I look at that short story list I compiled for Black SF Evathon, those are the ones where I've done like the best job of like filling out the summaries and the content warnings. And so I want to try and like branch out the literary magazines that I'm reading. So in general, I have a subscription to Fi Literary Magazine. It's a magazine devoted to Black speculative fiction, and I mean, it's like nice that I'm supporting it monetarily, but like I do want to like get caught up on it and do like some video reviews of it. I think at this point there's over 15 issues, so I'm not necessarily going to do like a video for each issue. So I think I'm going to try and do like a video for each year of 5 publications. And then I also want to do a better job at reading Apex, Omanana, which is devoted to African speculative fiction, and The Dark, which is devoted to horror fiction. In general, there's some authors whose names I keep seeing when I'm making these lists, or like I've seen them at conventions and they seem like they like write interesting work, so I want to do a better job at reading them, and I just haven't really done as good a job of reading them. And those are Kel Coleman, W.C. Dunlap, Alea Don Johnson, Maurice Broaddus, Toby Ogundiran, and Tlotlo Samasi. I mean, I interviewed Toby Ogundiran last year. I'll link the interview for people who want to see it. But like I'd only read 3 of his short stories at the time of the interview, and he has like a whole lot more out there. So I want to like read everything that he's written up to this point. So he's an author I'm going to be prioritizing next year, even though he's like not as new to me as these other authors. I've read like maybe 2 stories by Tamase. I might have read one story by Maurice Broaddus, and I don't think I've read anything by the other ones. Also, if you're also interested in reading Omanana magazine, Afro Fantasy Lit, which is a Discord-based book club devoted to reading science fiction and fantasy, based in and inspired by Africa, is going to be reading some issues of the magazine this year. This book club is hosted by Sandra of We Read Here and Soila of Soila Kenya, and I will put their links in the description box below. Also, I want to do better at mentioning the short stories I read in my monthly wrap-ups, so that's going to require that I do better at tracking them in my reading planner, because that's where I get most of my wrap-up stuff from. So this year I did the Melanin Eclectic Reading Planner. I might do a flip through at some point because I did have fun decorating it and doing spreads and stuff. I got it late. I got it in March, so I'm going to use it up until March of this year. But I also got the reading planner for next year. And so I'm just going to try and do better at keeping track of short stories in here as well. I don't know if there's any of the planners left because I got this in a pre-order and I know that they went fast and Brittany does a limited quantity. But you might still be able to get one on her website. I'll put the links in the description box below. And this one is themed superheroes. And this also has art for every month. So that is a thing to keep in mind if you're interested in this. I'm just going to do a quick little unboxing because I can, and I don't want to do a dedicated video. I think it'd just be easy to do it here. So there's also stickers that come with it, and these are my washies from last year. So I got the set that kind of came with the journal, the mermaid washi and then the purple and gold. I just really like that color combo for some reason. And then I got one from the collab with Injeri of Onyx pages, this ombre washi. Then I got some purple and silvers, which I will probably use in this one in the new year as well. And there's also washis that came with the new journal. There were 3 colors. I think it was purple, a lilac, a pink, and a green. And all the colors were nice, but I was really excited for the green. So I think that was the biggest departure from the colors that she'd had last year. And I just really like how it pops. And also, the little logo this year is so cute. It's inspired by She-Ra. So I am trying to read more short stories from more varied magazines. I'm also trying to read more classic SFF or SFF that sort of predates the genre label. So you'll notice that in my 5 books I want to read this year, 2 of those were books that are from the 1950s or earlier. I'm not someone who's as wedded to the first thing. I know that was a big Twitter discussion this year on who's the first science fiction writer, and I felt I really didn't have a dog in that fight. I'm interested more in the idea of genre as evolution and lineage and community, so more of a web than a this was the first and then boop 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 boop. I'm more interested in what's sort of the general conversation that shaped genre. I'm also trying to read more sci-fi and fantasy, romance, and erotica. I talked a little bit in my Reading in the New Year book tag about my journey into romance and what that's been like. What I read last year, it was pretty much all contemporary stuff, and so I do want to read more fantasy and science fiction and stuff with the speculative elements in it. I really am drawn to fantasy romance. If there's just a spin-off novella about the 5 minutes where Essen, Alabaster, and Anan are happy and living it up on Miov, I would be so pleased. But it's not happening. Generally, when I'm looking for fantasy romance and when I read fantasy in general, I'm okay with contemporary stuff or historical stuff, but I really like to read secondary world stuff, and especially with fantasy romance, I really want to read more secondary world fantasy romance. Also, like, I like the world building and the magic systems, and I feel like sometimes in like the contemporary fantasy romances that can like take a back seat to the romance. I really want the magic to still be a strong part of the story. I really want the world to feel like cohesive and interesting, or if it's like not necessarily super cohesive, I want it to feel like really like whimsical and big. And there are like some magical elements where if it happens in our world, I'm like, that's fine. Like I kind of expect that. Like vampires, werewolves, ghosts, stuff like that feels like very tied to our world. Feels like more gritty or more grimy, like urban fantasy, where it's like, oh, there's like this bar and like all these magical beings have been in hiding, but like they come to this bar or like this nightlife and they have a good time. Like stuff like that I like, but in general, once we start getting into like bigger creatures or bigger magics that wouldn't like really seamlessly blend into our world, I tend to prefer it being set off in like a completely new world as opposed to like there being like this whole like elaborate cover up and like secret society situation on why like regular humans don't know about it. Like I don't like it when it's like that whole reveal where it's like the normal character realizes there's this whole new world and oh my goodness, everything you thought was a lie. Like, did you know that like vampires caused World War I? When it gets to stuff like that, I'm like, I don't. It's not my thing. I don't care for it. But I think there's also like a lot of black writers writing like contemporary fantasy romance or like urban fantasy romance. I think I'm like gonna miss a lot of black authors who are writing fantasy romance or sci-fi romance if I like say I only want it in like a secondary world. I'm going to shout out Vina of Miss WC Reader and Kay of Read Love Listen because I know they read more contemporary fantasy romances and they have recommended some and I'm going to try and read a few of them. Like I know Miss WC Reader has been really going hard for Magic Dark, Magic Divine by AJ Locke and Forging a Nightmare by Patricia Jackson. And I know that Kay of Read Love Listen had read like some billionaire vampire romance and a dragon shifter romance she had read recently. So I will probably check one of those titles out. Next question is name 3 non-book related goals. Last year I wanted to pitch 1 essay to 4 paid publications and that didn't really happen. Like I had 1 essay where I got it to a good place and I pitched it one place and I really flubbed the pitch and like maybe it was for the best. I'm someone who I really like to be confident about what I'm saying before I say it. But I don't think it was in a place where I wanted it to be. But also the subject matter is such like I don't know if it's ever going to be in a place where I want it to be, you know? Like, I'm not really in a rush to pitch it anywhere else just yet. Because writing deadlines are like really tight and kind of like I can't really do extensive edits once I get them. Like depending on my work schedule, I just like might not have the time to do it. In terms of like writing stuff right now, I'm really just focusing on fan fiction and like completing stuff. My other goal was I wanted to be able to do like some eyeshadow and eyeliner looks and like that was there's no need. Like I'm not a glamour girl. I'm never gonna be a glamour girl. If I need to do like a really elaborate eye look, I'm going to ask a friend or a cousin or I'm gonna pay somebody. Like it's not gonna happen. Like I put on my eyeshadow with my fingers because it's just easier and faster for me than using a brush. Also, like most people have like one face that they do and that's just like all they do ever. Like I don't need to really do like multiple eye looks. So really I just need to work on eyeliner, so like getting it tight to my eye and working on doing my left eye because that's like takes a little effort. And I mean, I did it today. It took a little bit, but it happened. So I guess I'm just gonna work on the eyeliner. That's more of what I'm gonna be wearing realistically, and that's really where I think that I'm gonna see like more benefits from practicing. And my last goal of last year was just like being more honest. And yeah, COVID has kind of sapped my ability to maintain relationships that I don't like. Yeah, I think I'm also just gonna be like reflecting on like what's the purpose of being honest. I don't know. And the goal of being honest is to be more understood, or if I wasn't understood, just to feel like it was off my chest. And to feel like dealing with situations where it's like I am being more honest, but like it's still not really getting me the understanding, and I don't necessarily feel like it's off my chest. Because it feels like I'm beating a dead horse when I keep bringing up this thing that this other person just doesn't understand. So, getting into goals for this year. I want to be able to vacuum my room, which doesn't sound like a big undertaking, but it is because my room is just very cluttered right now. Like before I can vacuum, I really am going to need to organize everything first. I need to get my books up off the floor. I need to like rearrange my closet so that like my shoe rack actually works and like I can see all my like yarn so I know where everything is. I think I just need to start tossing some of these books, honestly. Like, I wanted to read everything that I had bought, but like realistically, I'm not gonna read all this stuff. Yeah, because there's some stuff I'm just not gonna use, and it's like not sentimental to me because it's not happening at this point. So I am gonna need to look for a bookshelf. It needs to be short because the only space in my room is like right beneath my window, so it probably can't be more than like 3 feet tall. I prefer to buy one used or like refurbish something. And then also, I mentioned in my Ringing the New Year book tag that Modazushi is like it's my thing. It's what I'm doing in my free time. And I love the opening theme to the cartoon for the first 2 seasons. It's called Drunken Dreams of the Past. And I want to be able to play it on my ocarina. I posted about my ocarina on Twitter a little bit, but this is a real instrument. I learned about it through Zelda Ocarina of Time, like a lot of people, but like it has actual history outside of that game. And I got a plastic one because I don't have to worry about like dropping it or whatever. And I played like concert flute for like most of my like childhood school days, so like it wasn't a super big transition to go from concert flute to this. So I have some songs I can play already. I play like a lot of like songs from the Zelda game. I play a few themes from anime, and just because I feel like showing off and because I can, I'll play a little bit from Inuyasha's Lullaby. So yeah, I'm not gonna play the whole thing, but you can hear I'm still working on like vibrato and breath control because I have not played in a minute. So all of that good breathing conditioning just went out the window. But I also wanted to play a little bit. I think it's Saria's song from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Editing Chloe here. So the version of Suria's song I tried to play was absolute garbage, and I refuse to let that go on the record, so I'm going to replay it here. My next goal was learning how to rollerblade backwards. Basically, the day after Thanksgiving, I took some cousins to a skating rink, and I don't think that was an experience. They were charging for like everything. Like they charged us for a walker, for like my cousin who'd like never skated before. You had to pay money to like open and close the lockers. Like you couldn't even just like pay it once and they'd give it back. Like it was a whole thing. I already have a plan for how I'm gonna get around that locker situation. And like the music, I was dying. It's like 2 p.m. on a Friday. And it's all like 13-year-olds or under on the rink floor. And they're playing like Bus It and like they had like some like club mix of like the one hand on neck, like one hand on frontal, like TikTok sound. Like it was a whole thing. I was like, I don't know if this music is for kids, but I'm having a good time, so I will be back. Like I'm not really trying to do like roller derby or like speed skating, so I'm like trying to like learn how to just do things that like I can do kind of slow, like at a roller rink, and like the goal is just like look good basically. So I have sort of started being able to skate backwards. Not really like I can do like I think they're called like backwards scissors. But like if these are your toes and like these are your heels, you go like you you sorta. But basically I can do that backwards. Very, very slowly and not very consistently, but like that's like kind of the first step to like working my way up to actually being able to skate backwards. I'm trying to put in like an hour a week. So that's everything for non-bookish goals. Next question is what's a book you've had forever that you still need to read? So if you watch my last year's video, the the situation hasn't gotten much better. I have read like maybe like 5 or 6 books that I own, but it's like nowhere near like the books I want to read. And in terms of like what I'm going to talk about on the channel, I'm just going to mention the books by Black authors. And last year I really like got into it. I gave like a quick 1 sentence synopsis for all of them, and I'm not going to do this year because a lot of these are repeats. So if you want to get more of them, you can just look them up or watch last year's video. So I have not read Love by Toni Morrison, Forest of a Thousand Demons by D.O. Fagunwa, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker, Seed Bearing Prince by Devon Sanders, Image of Amazon Chocolate by K. Murray Johnson, Cold by Constance Burris, Love and Color by Bolu Babalola, Dark Genesis by A.D. Kaboa, Tale of the Astonishing Black Spark by Charlie J. Eskew, Cane River by Lolita Tademi, Stars of the New Curfew by Ben Okri, Riot Baby by Tochi Onyebuchi. This was an ebook I got from the Tor Book Club. If you're based in the US, it's good for free ebooks. Like they give you about like maybe 4 or 5 a year. There's usually some pretty interesting titles on there. Open Weave by Deborah Major, Jiwe. This is one I heard about from Soila Kenya. I got it on Gumroad. Midnight in Indigo, which is a short story collection. A River Called Time by Portia Newland. Within These Wicked Walls by Lauren Blackwood. My Fishy Stepmom by Shakira Bourne. Conquest by Celeste Hart. What Are You Doing Here by Lena Dawes. Kings of Earth by Joe Ponder. And Delightfully Twisted Tales by Nikki Drayden. Nikki Drayden has a couple of short story collections. I think they're all in ebook form for now. But we had, which is a virtual book club that I co-moderate, had her for a talk 2 years ago at this point. And she gave a free ebook to all attendees, and I would like to read it at some point. So now the big one, goal setting for next year. One word that you're hoping 2022 will be. So last year I did collaborative. I really wanted to focus more on like working with other booktubers and making videos that were collaborative. So read-alongs, discussions, author interviews, and I think I did that. I think that took me in like a really interesting direction. Last year's the first year I had done author interviews. First year I'd moderated a panel. I think that grew my channel's purpose in like a really interesting way, and I was really happy with that. I think the other word I want is impactful. Impactful to the viewers, impactful to the people who I platform, impactful for me. So this channel is devoted to uplifting science fiction, fantasy, supernatural, paranormal, horror, like speculative writings by Black authors, and that's going to continue to be the focus this year. And I think that's just a question on how to do that better. So I do read stuff that isn't really speculative. I will read stuff that's more like realistic fiction or nonfiction, but in general, if it's featured on my channel, I'm going to mostly keep that to Black authors. Really, I think the only exception I'm going to make to that is if there's like a read-along going along that I'm participating in, and I want to like signal boost the booktuber. I think the scope has worked for me pretty well so far. In general, I reorganized my channel to like better show like what resources I've already created. I had the playlist already set up, but I realized that like you really couldn't find them anywhere. Like they just kind of existed just in like my YouTube studio or whatever. So I set up my channel so that you can see like, oh, you know, Chloe has this like series of reviews of fantasy books by Black authors, horror by Black authors, science fiction by Black authors. Oh, like Chloe has done some recommendations. She's done these like read-alongs and these readathons, and like just making my channel more of a resource that's easy to use. I think up to this point I've kind of assumed that I'm only really going to get like repeat people, or like if I post stuff on social media, and just like trying to make it easier to navigate if you're someone who's just putzing around online and then like stumble upon my channel. Part of like being impactful in terms of like who I like highlight on the channel was that last year I started interviewing short story authors. I had initially only been interviewing authors who had like novellas or novels out because I'm not paying people who appear on my channel at this time. And I was like, well, really the only reason to be on my channel is if you're trying to promote a book. And authors who write novellas and novels typically have a contract where they get more money for however many books they sell. Whereas with short story authors, they get paid a lump sum up front, and they get money if they resell the story to different markets, but like there's necessarily like the same motivators for them to like sell more issues of the magazine. And LP Kindred pointed out that like there's also like the joy of just like talking about what you've written and that people don't read short story authors as much. And so to like have affirmed that like people are reading their stuff and enjoying their stuff is also like a opportunity for writers. And so I started interviewing more short story authors. I've really enjoyed it. And I want to make author interviews a monthly thing on my channel. So far I have like a list of people I want to talk to each month. And I've reached out to people for January and February, and I'm going to kind of like hold off on the other ones until we're closer to the time for those. I think one a month is like a good pace for me because it is a relatively low time investment for me to make an interview, especially for short stories. I think this year I'm going to think about how I feel about follow-up interviews or having authors back on, because as authors release new stuff or as I just like reread stuff and have a different perspective on it, it might be worth having authors back. I also want to try and do more literature panels. Like I think only 2 a year. I think last year for my BookTube birthday tag, I said I wanted to host a panel of authors, and I was able to do that. I did that for FIACon. I'll talk about that experience a little bit more during my October wrap up, because FIACon was held in October, so I'm also going to be reflecting on how that experience was and how moderating and all that stuff went. And I would like to be able to do that more on my own channel. I have like a fluffy one on dragons that I'm trying to put together. I say fluffy in that usually my interviews are like very narrow, very focused. And this one is more, it's more like amorphous. It's going to be more chatty. And like I have people who I think would make that a good conversation, but it's just like figuring out how to set the vibe for that and scripting it up isn't coming as naturally to me. Bree from the Lock Booktician, her Black Awenathon interviews, I only saw one, but I feel like she really has a knack for like that like fun feel. So I'm going to watch her stuff for research and like try and come back to it. But I don't think I can do panels super frequently. There's more time that goes into like coming up with a cohesive idea for the panel, figuring out how I'm going to like take the viewer through different parts of like the topic that I pick, and then figuring out who's going to be like a good fit for the panel. And I also wanted to devote more time to recommendations this year. I've done some in the past kind of spottily to like highlight other readathons going on. The recommendation videos I've done in the past have been Black SFF stuff, but I want to do like more like targeted Black SFF recommendations throughout the year. I think I'm just going to stick to 4 a year. I do make Twitter threads pretty frequently, or even just like themed TBR threads pretty frequently to boost other readathons. I kind of like already structured my Goodreads where it would be like pretty simple for me to like give recommendations. I'd see asks for certain things over and over again, like asks for books set in forests, asks for books with violent women protagonists, asks for books with shapeshifters. So I just kind of had like set up my Goodreads tabs to like track those books, and so I could either do themed TBRs or recommendation videos off of that pretty easily. And I realized that there was like a lot of stuff on the Twitter side, but like not a lot of that was documented on my channel. So I'm trying to get more of that on the channel. I put a list of videos I could potentially make in my community tab, and so far it looks like deities as characters is the most popular, so that's the one I'm going to prioritize. Not sure when it'll be out yet, probably March. So yeah, that's everything. Tag a friend. I don't know if I really need to tag anybody. I feel like the New Year's book tag is a BookTube staple, but like I know I'll be watching to see what Lucy Reads posts, Noria of Chronicles of Noria, Curly Top Reads, Olivia's Catastrophe, if Amber Dior does it, a Literature Science Alliance. Yeah, those are the people I'll be keeping an eye out for. Thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. Have a good one. Goodbye.